Welcome to another episode of the Vikingology podcast. I'm thing number one.
Oh, hey, yay, back to that. I'm thing number two, flashback to like 3 years ago when we first started. Yay.
Thing one and thing
I'm Terry
two.
Barnes, thing two. Yeah, and here we are. Welcome to Vikingology, the art and science of the Viking Age.
There we go. And today, Terry, we're gonna be outnumbering you, we creatives, because normally we're talking to archaeologists, historians, curators of museums, etc. Occasionally we'll have a writer, but today we have two writers. And there's me, so that's three. That's the magic, the Norns. We are the writing Norns of Norse sagas. And Terry, you will be, well, you're in for a good ride, I think.
Okay, wait, I have a show and tell once we get started, so I'll keep going.
Oh, fun. Okay. Well, today we are joined by the esteemed Johanna Wittenberg, who is the author of the Norse Women's Saga, and K.S. Barton, also known as Kim, I believe,
Yeah.
author of the Norse Family Saga book. And I believe that one's under Simon and Schuster. I thought I saw that somewhere. And together, with their powers combined, they are Shield Maidens, Women in the Norse World podcast, but only when they're together. So welcome, Joanna and Kim.
Oh, thanks
Thank
for having
you.
us.
That's
So
great to be
Terry,
here.
Terry, you have a show and tell. So let's kick it off with that.
Yeah. Well, as some of our loyals will know, yesterday was our birthday, right, CJ?
Yes, it was. We're
You have
birthday
the same
buddies.
birthday, don't you?
We
Mhm.
do. We do. And
Happy birthday.
my lovely husband bought me something. Well, I have it already, but I needed a new one because I've worn it out. But so anyway, I'm wearing it for this occasion.
Oh,
All
nice.
right.
Yay.
Brought to you by our lovely friend Krista, also known as Scandinavian Design Studio.
Oh yeah,
Shout
that's
out,
these
shout out.
little stickers.
Yeah, she created the little
Oh,
sheep,
that's cute.
the
Oh
little
wait, she
elves.
inspired me.
Okay. Yay.
We'll give
Yeah.
you a
Oh, and she
photo.
gave me an Icelandic sweater.
Oh, that's so
Did
cute.
she knit it herself?
Yeah. She's learning. She's living there now, so she's learning.
No, so
But
she so
anyway,
she uh she inspired me. So then I went and took the artwork that my wife made for our kids book, and I made some little stickers for the kids.
Oh, that's
I
So I'll
love
cute.
be
it.
nice.
I'll be taking
Nice.
these little bad boys to that's the dad, the chief, the Viking chieftain, a historically accurate one, and
That's
I'll be
nice.
taking that to book fair tomorrow at Nomute, which will be a lot of fun.
Well, and mine too is because obviously I teach about Vikings and all that stuff, but if for people who know me online, that my handle is Shield Maiden PDX. So I adopted the name, although I will say, full disclosure, I'm a skeptic on the whole Shield Maiden thing.
We all need to be at some point, right? Or to some
Right,
degree, right?
right, right.
Yeah. Wonderful. Okay, well, so to kick today off, since we have writers, we're gonna dive into some fun topics. My favorite topic. I think I bring this up every time we have writers on the show because I think and then we start with this question, right? And then we'll see where it takes us. But to the two of you, I posit a question that I had the privilege of answering with a couple of other writers on stage in 2017 at IMC Leads, which is how historical should historical fiction be?
Ugh.
Go right for the big stuff.
It's a whopper.
Wow, you don't mess around.
All right, good luck.
Mm.
You want to
Who's
go
gonna go
first, Kim, or do
first?
you want me to?
Go ahead. You can go.
Okay, I'll go. What I think is, given the woeful inaccuracy of much of what we have to base our historical fiction on, I think that you need to start with the facts and hew closely to them if they are indeed facts. And then what you're really doing is writing a good story.
That's a good answer.
That is a good
Yeah.
answer.
Yeah.
Well, I always feel like I am writing fiction, and if you have to have everything like exactly as everything was, then you might as well just pick up a history book. So to me, character development and everything are really, really important. I'm not saying that I didn't do like years and years of research and I don't care about the historical, but I also feel like how accurate is the history we're actually getting? Like, all right, you mentioned 2017 when we found out that BJ58 hello, was actually a woman's, where for 100 years we thought that gravesite was for a man. So I take a lot of the history with a grain of salt since so much of it was written down so much later than the Viking Age. It was written down by enemies of the Vikings. It was written down by priests and monks. And so,
Misogynist.
Hey,
yeah.
now, come on now. We can't broad brush all of the history.
I think some
So
of them were
I,
schizos. Fiery dragons in the sky. What are you writing?
Hey, they
I
were
mean,
They're
good.
dragons.
I think the history is really, really important, right? Like I'm not saying that it's not important. I'm just saying that history is so malleable almost. Like who tells the history? Who writes it down? What do we teach in schools? What gets left out? So whenever we talk about like accuracy and stuff, and I'm like, well, a lot of it's in translation. So how do we know if we're not actually reading the Old Norse language, we're relying and trusting people who are translating too. So it's such a complicated question.
I think archaeology is a much more reliable source. I found that out when I first started researching my books. I'm like the history was like, mostly non-existent in a lot of cases, but often so far-fetched. But then I started studying the archaeology, and that's where I got most of my information. Another
Hmm.
thing I want to say is the reason that people read historical fiction is to be transported to another time and place. And so to me, that's our job, which is to transport people to the time that we're writing about. And we want to give people the best cultural experience we can. So they're immersed in that time and place.
Wonderful.
Well, and also I tend to focus more on like families and relationships. So there's not as much known about like what goes on in a home or whatever. As opposed, I mean, not that I have plenty of warriors and stuff, but so we know a lot about that part of Viking society, but
That's what I
not as
love
much
about your
about some of the
books. You
others.
talk about everyday people more than the royalty and, the so in some ways much more relatable.
Things.
Hmm. Yeah, at IMC Leeds, we had a pretty varied cast of characters answering this question, and we were actually all lined up on the spectrum of who kind of toes the historical line more, and I was more on that side. And we had one gal on the far end that was writing Viking Age vampire fantasy novels, which
Well, they
which are
did believe in
tremendous.
vampires, or actually Walking Dead, but go
Yeah,
ahead.
they were. I mean, it was a fantastic. No, hers were like Romanian Count Dracula type vampires, right? Like the shiny. No, even worse, the shiny Twilight ones. Um,
Mm.
but the tremendous books, right? And she had a huge following, and I thought that was really interesting because it's like it really boils down to if you're telling a good story, the history really comes second, right? So for the people who are looking for that. So then moving on to, uh, I get this question a lot. How did you fall into the Viking Age? Why the Vikings and not something, is it there are so many times and places to pick from.
Well, I started learning about the Viking Age when I was in college, actually, even late high school. My mother was full-blooded Norwegian. I'm only half. But she got really, really interested in the Viking Age, and was an artist, and she started researching, and I was helping her with that during my summer breaks. And she created these fabulous serigraphs that are based on mostly the wood carvings from the Viking Age, especially the Oseberg ship. And so when I graduated from college, she had a show in Oslo and she took my sister and I along. So I got to visit the Viking ship museum. I saw all the carvings, the Oseberg ship, and and we discovered Queen Osa, who's the subject of my novels. And that was, a long time ago. And I've been fascinated by her ever since. So when I decided to start writing novels, I wanted to write about her. And the fact that there was a woman who ruled alone for almost 20 years in the early Viking Age, and that was actually written down somewhere was fascinating to me. So that was my starting point.
Well, I've always been interested in mythology and like comparative literature, comparative mythology ever since I was probably, I don't know, like a freshman in high school. And about 15 or 20 years ago, I was doing a nonfiction project. I was studying a particular book series, and I was finding a way into it for kids using the mythology. Well, I have a degree in English and stuff, and I already knew a lot of Greek mythology. You can't go through the university as an English major and not know Greek mythology in the United States. But when I got, and I also did a little bit with Celtic mythology and Egyptian mythology, but when I got to the Norse mythology, I was like, oh, this is cool. And then I started reading the sagas. And then it was like, because my family on my mother's side is also Scandinavian. And so it was like, it was this weird kind of homecoming. Like, oh, these people, even though they're like, these Vikings were portrayed as bloodthirsty and all this, I was like, these are my people. So I was just like, oh, I love I love literature and I love history. And I felt like it was like finally had come together what I should write. I was like, oh, I need to combine these two things and write about Vikings.
Hmm. Fun. And then how did your podcast come about? How did you meet? Because Terry and I have talked a lot about this. She reached out after one of her students cited an article of mine in a paper, which is terrifying,
Mm.
and gave me some feedback on it. And then we kind of went back and forth, then figured out, wait a minute, we have the same birthday. Oh, really? And then it was like, hey, I'm trying to do a podcast. Do you want to do a podcast? And Terry was like, oh, I don't know,
No,
maybe.
wait, I was the one who suggested it. I was totally the one who suggested it.
And
We're
then
like,
and then the stars aligned, and then we were like, let's do a podcast. And very quickly so how did what's your foundational narrative for your podcast?
Well, I'm the one who reached out to Johanna. I had wanted to do a podcast that focused on women in the Norse world. And I'd just been kind of like, I don't know, for a long time, like a year, I would think about it and then I go, oh, it's too much work. I don't want to do it. And I knew I had to have a co-host. I did not want to do it by myself. And then I was at it was an online historical writers, was it the History Quill, I think? They were
Yes, I
doing
think
an
it was.
online
History Quill.
conference and I was in a breakout room with Johanna and she was talking and I thought, oh, she would be perfect. I'd read her some of at least a couple of your books at that time and then and I was like, oh yeah, her books are great. Her research is so good. And so I reached out to her and then I don't know, met a few times and kind of hashed out the details.
And we have never met in person.
No.
we've only met once in person
We made it
in three
happen.
in 3 years, but yeah.
Open invitation to France. Come see us.
All
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Terry will go as far as Iceland, but
Yep.
But not France. That's a bridge too far.
I may have to go to Iceland to see her again, which I'm okay with. I was
That
gonna
That's
doesn't
go.
my
sound like a
second home.
hardship.
No.
It's my second home. What can I say?
I want to go to Thor's gym and train with the mountain,
There-
but I'm getting older. Like time's passing, my body started. Like I tore a tricep the other day.
Oh,
Yeah, at first big muscle tear ever, and now I'm thinking,
Get
I'm
used
not.
to it. It's all downhill now.
Well, but I think I missed my window to train with Thor because now I'll die. Like I could have held my own 10 years ago.
actually, I just was messaging with a friend yesterday who's bike riding in Spain, and she crashed her bike and broke her femur.
Ooh.
So it could be
Oh,
worse, CJ. It could be worse. You could be like
yeah.
getting
Yeah.
surgery in a foreign country, getting a rod put in your leg, and then looking at a plane ride back to the
Oh
States.
my
Oh my
gosh.
goodness.
Wow.
That sounds
Yeah.
terrible.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, you know what they say, if you take all of your baggage and you throw it out in a room with everybody else's baggage, you'll go right back and take yours back.
I've never heard that before.
Me neither.
Yeah.
Now we know.
So how did
so
the
have you
title
guys, I
come
don't know if
about? Oh, sorry, go ahead, Terry.
no, go ahead. I was just going to quickly say, just sort of shout out to my one of my PhD supervisors, but I'm imagining you all have seen this book,
Oh, I haven't.
The Hidden Lives of
Mm-mm.
Viking Women. This is brand new this year.
Oh,
Oh,
It's a collection of
nice.
it's on my
essays
list.
edited by, yeah, Michelle Hoyer Smith and also Alexandra
Oh,
Sanmar.
yeah.
Friend of the show, been on the podcast, but yeah, so she's my PhD supervisor. But yeah, so
Nice.
it's a nice
Cool.
collection of essay that's archaeology and history. Because, like you say,
Nice.
Johanna, I mean, the archaeology is very interesting. Although probably, the gold standard is the mix of all of them, right? Because archaeology
Absolutely.
has to be interpreted as well. You can't just sort of look at objects in sort of isolation without sort of making up a story about them.
I mean,
Exactly. That's what we do.
you can, but then you get the dinosaurs, right? Which is
Right.
Yeah.
now they're figuring out that they just threw skin on bones, and so we made them, so that the new revised T-Rex, they plumped it up like a chicken. It's hilarious. But that's probably how it looked. It was probably actually quite round.
Yeah.
A really big chicken.
But yeah, but for like a century and a half, we're like, it's a skinny, like gross, monstrous looking thing. No, it's a chicken.
A really big one.
It's a chicken with teeth. So Terry, you mentioned something. I'm going to leverage this because I think this will be fun. Mentioning that you're still somewhat of a shield maiden skeptic, and then we have uh, two folks here who are have a podcast named Shield Maiden. So how did you come up with the name Shield Maiden, and can you convince Terry that they were a thing?
No. Good
Well,
luck.
I think
Kim, you came
w-
up with
w-
the title.
well, we wanted to do women in the Norse world, and then we thought that shield maidens at the front of that would be it was really just marketing. It's just a
It kind of lets people know
pops a
what
little more.
approach we're taking, I think, don't
Hmm.
you? Yeah, what our
Yeah.
slant is.
Yeah, the strength, even if they're not out there fighting, the strength of women in the Viking Age is
Mhm.
highlighted.
Yeah, the strength and also the fact that they did have agency, that they did
Mhm.
wield power. They weren't just these little chattel, which is what came later. That was a much later thing. So, even the legal documents that we have are from later. They're from post-Christian, so they're not totally reliable as far as women's rights. But we do know from like the Grey Goose, Icelandic legal, and Frostating that women did have rights and they could own property. They could divorce, that sort of thing in the Viking Age. And, we also have legends that talk about shield maidens, and we have some archaeological studies that pretty much prove it. Not that they were necessarily really common, but that it was possible.
Yeah, like the episode that just came out at the beginning of September, we talked about Lagertha,
Mhm.
both as she is in the stories and as she was depicted in the show Vikings.
Yeah, and also Aslaug, who was,
Yeah. Mhm.
also a shield maiden. She didn't necessarily fight in. Neither one of them were. Well, actually, Lagertha did fight in the
Mhm.
shield wall. Aslaug did not necessarily, but she did command a fleet. Um, and we know of the Red Girl from Ireland. She commanded a fleet. So, there's getting to be more and more evidence that's being compiled now that point in that direction. Um, what you want to make of it, that's up to the individual author, I think.
Well,
I had,
go ahead.
oh, I had really believed that women could bear arms and did have rights much when I first started writing, and that was during when I was still writing my first book is when BJ 581 was revealed to be a woman. So I had already started that down that road before. But it was really hard to find historical information that supported that. So it was nice to find the archaeological.
Is that what's the margin of error on that skeleton's DNA sequence for the gendering? Is there a margin of error?
There
No,
has to.
it's
Where they're
got more
like,
to do. It's
this
got
is
more to do with
female. Yeah.
it's the bone structure as well
Hmm.
as the DNA.
It wasn't the first person who noticed because of the hips, the hip
Yeah,
bones.
because of the
Oh,
pelvic.
the
It was
pelvis was
definitely
a woman.
a distinctly female pelvis.
Mhm.
And then they went on to do DNA testing after that. But there are
Yeah.
two people who were completely uh, not affiliated in any way and didn't know each other, noticed that. And the first person who noticed it didn't even know that the bones were from BJ 581 from that grave. But they noted that it was a female skeleton, and they were on some other study, so they didn't really know where that skeleton had come from. So then it was a second osteologist who noticed the same thing. And that's when it suddenly came to everyone's attention. And it was later that they did the DNA testing.
There wasn't there an issue with the excavation too, where all the bones got shoved in a bag, and so there was some.
No,
I
no.
could have sworn I saw
They were
something on that.
meticulous. Okay, so the archaeologist meticulously drew sketches of the burial. He actually labeled every bone BJ 581. Um, and the the belief that there was any kind of mix-up is not true.
Hmm.
Um, it was a meticulously excavated site.
Hmm. Yeah, I saw another show too that was, I think it was on Disney Plus that I saw it, and it had friend of the show, Leszek Gardella, who
Mhm.
Mhm.
I don't actually remember what he talked about in the show, but the thing that caught my attention, sorry, Leszek, but the part that got my attention was when they looked at the I think it was BJ 581, but it is they looked at the spinal cord and the vertebrae had calcification on opposing sides all the way down, which was evidence of like tension in the spine that's consistent with somebody who drew a bow a lot. Or
That's possible. That part I'm not
that's
familiar
what
with.
they were, but also the whole thing was narrated by William Shatner, which always makes me dubious. But it was, it was like, oh, and then they found three other graves of potentially women, and I think two were actually revealed to be women later too. So that we are finding this stuff kind of all over the
Mhm.
place. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Although,
there was a bow and arrow. The bow wasn't found, but the quiver and arrows, I think, were
Or
found
arrows.
in the
Hmm.
Mhm.
grave, but the bow was missing, or at least only partially there. But that was definitely found in BJ 581.
Mm.
Plus, didn't she had the conical hat from
Hmm.
the east, and so
Hmm.
it's possible that maybe she was an archer. She could have been a horse. She could have been a
Yeah, she was
horseback.
buried with horses, so
Yeah.
and they think, there's a possibility she was buried possibly sitting in her saddle because the stirrups were found in the position where her feet would be, and the skeleton had collapsed, but it was, in a sitting position.
Oh, so they buried her sitting upright potentially.
Well, that's the theory, yeah.
Oh,
Because
that's like
it was a, a large tomb, and it was covered with a big rock, as I recall.
Hmm.
it's a
yeah.
chamber grave.
Yeah, thanks.
Ah. Uh-huh. So are you
It
convinced
seems
yet,
like
Terry?
there's.
Right.
Well, Leszek actually wrote a really good book about like women and weapons in the Viking Age, and I think he handles it very well. The truth is, we don't know, and
Exactly.
we'll never know. There's that kind of a grave. actually produces more questions than answers, I think. We don't know why those weapons are there. We actually don't know if they were hers. We don't know if she used them. She could have just been a rich girl and, stuff could have, because people who are dead don't decide what gets put in their grave. People who bury them put the stuff in their grave. I mean, but yeah, so we don't know. And because I wrote a piece about this back in like 2018 when this all kind of blew up, because I was just more interested in, as a historian, looking at what happened when that story came out and how much of a big deal it was and how many sort of people sort of lined up on their sides of, yes, she is, or no, she isn't. And I was kind of like, why does it matter? Like, who cares? Like, it felt to me like there was just way more of what I see in my students, and that's projection of our desires for that type of person in the past. And that's not to say that there never was, like you're saying. It's just, I mean, clearly from at least the evidence that we have, and even grave evidence, it's like less than 1% of all of the graves from the Viking Age that have been excavated that have females in them have weapons in them. And so it just points to the fact that at the very least, these people were one-offs, they weren't the norm. It's not like we had some sort of, professional trained contingent of women doing a thing, at least that we have evidence for. So that's always the punctuation at the end of the sentence is like, this is the best guess that we have for right now, right? And so I was just more intrigued with why people got so like upset and or interested and freaked out. And it was just kind of a weird sort of blow up in a way that you don't really see too much with your, when you're in the historian and archaeology crowd. It's usually a pretty quiet discipline. But then the internet blew up because there was a woman warrior, and it's like, I don't know.
It was kind of a surprise that it got to be such a big deal.
Yeah,
Mhm.
totally.
Mhm.
Totally. Well, I mean, and they, and I kind of accused um the authors of the article. I mean, like you're saying, picking the name Shield Maiden for your podcast and the marketing, and like I think it was even Leszek who told us, like, right, why his most recent book, Vikings in Poland. Well, why is it called that? Well, because you're told if you put the word Vikings on anything, then it sells.
Right.
And then when they like publish an article with, female Viking warrior confirmed by genomics, it was kind of like, okay, come on now, that's like a little bit of clickbait there.
Well, at
We don't.
least one thing it did was it now archaeologists are asking different questions about the grave goods and stuff. They're not just
Yeah.
That's something,
assuming that just because there was a weapon, it's a male, or if it was
Yeah.
a
Yeah. And
loom
I
or a
think that,
cooking instruments, that it's automatically a female.
yeah.
or
Yeah. No,
if
I
it, or that
think
if it's an iron rod, it's naturally a cooking spit instead of a vulva's wand, for
right.
example.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
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 Well, I mean, in the archaeology crowd, I mean, that discussion actually has been going on for quite a while. It's called gendering metal, right? And, so they've been dealing with that for a while. But I think that BJ 581 sort of, brought that to the fore, that there's problems with making those kinds of 19th century assumptions.
Yeah, we
Well,
Yeah.
that
had a
was
lot
my
of talks
point.
about the
Yeah.
Victorians.
Yeah.
They have a lot to answer
Yeah.
for. But
Yeah.
that was my point about, like, the biases in the historical record, like who decides these things is
Yeah.
important to think about.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Especially in Norway, where, most of the soil is such that you don't have a lot of bone, you don't have skeletons are pretty much non-existent. So you have to go by grave goods to gender a grave
Yeah.
in many, many places.
Yeah. Well, and I do think too, I mean, most of everything that we have in sort of totality, whether it's, science, archaeology, written sources, whatever, in a general sense, do point to a fairly traditionally gendered society like the rest of sort of medieval Western Europe. So I don't think gendering metal in a way that maybe you would traditionally do it is not always and entirely going to be off the mark, right? I mean, brooches are probably going to suggest it was a female, that wore them and that kind of stuff. So I think we have to be careful too with sort of the pendulum swings of like either it's all over here or like, oh nope, throw all of that out. It's way over here now. I don't think that's the case. I think it's always somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
Well,
That's
because
a
we
good
do
point.
have the Odin figurine
Yeah.
dressed in women's clothing, but with one eye and with, his wolves and his, it's not his wolves, it's his birds, Hugin and
Sure.
Munin, right?
Yeah.
And so, I mean, that brings up a lot of questions because one eye and two ravens, that's very much an Odin figure, but
Yeah.
he's definitely wearing women's clothes.
Yeah.
So what's
Well,
that all
what we would consider women's clothes. I mean, if we go flash forward 1,000 years and let's say society crumbles and it all gets rebuilt from the ground up, and then it's a fairly patriarchal society like we have today, and the first people to excavate it are let's say male, male dominated future archaeological setup, and they were to excavate Western Africa. My family did a lot in Western Africa, and they have the traditional male dress, which is le boubou, which is like a long dress. And 1,000 years from now, they might look at that and be like, "That's obviously women's clothing. What are all these men doing in women's clothing?"
That's a good point.
So,
That is a very
um,
good
Well, and
point.
it's so specific. So like I live in a town where there's a university and it's very hot where I live. And so like if somebody were to just excavate here and then oh my gosh, everybody wore shorts and tank tops and flip-flops.
Yeah.
Oh, when men and women, or men didn't actually wear regular shoes, or everybody was wearing, I don't know, Uggs because it's college students. And even though it never really gets below like 50 here, the young girls wear Uggs, when it dips below 65 Fahrenheit, so everybody ate pizza or whatever it is, or,
Yeah.
everybody ate Mexican food because I live near the Mexican border. Like, so if you're just
Yep.
excavating a specific place, especially since the Viking Age was all over and for several hundred years. So, like, what one little, I don't know, little area in Norway was doing and their beliefs and stuff might have been different than what they were doing. I don't know. Of course, in Iceland, Iceland was basically a colony. So
Mhm.
I always kind of think of like the Icelandic sagas, like they're like a colony or like the Wild West of the US, right? It's like these people who migrated because they didn't like what was going on back home. And then they set up this colony in like pretty harsh conditions and a lot of them, the West is pretty brutal, right? It gets really hot, at least in like Arizona and but anyway, and so like their society was set up in a different way than like it was in Denmark because Denmark was much more continental. They had much more interaction with France and well, what is now France and Germany. But
Yeah.
so I think about it that way too. It's too broad to just go like this is what everybody believed and this is what everybody did.
Well, and
Yeah, I
even,
agree.
oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say I agree. And I think we have even, archaeological evidence for sure, place name evidence, things like that, that show, at least prior to Christianity bringing in a little bit more uniformity in various ways, that they're just like us. I mean, I'm in Oregon on the West Coast and I'm an American, but culturally we're pretty different than say somebody who's living in, I don't know, Alabama or something, right? And
Mhm.
so and there's a dialect and the language, all of it, right? And so it's like, why wouldn't those people be the same? And I think we have fairly good evidence that that's true, that they were, unique.
Yeah, there's an area on the west coast of Norway called Gausel, and it is the graves there are preponderant. The preponderance of graves are gendered as female in that area, unlike the rest of Norway, and they far outnumber the male graves. Of course, there are no bones at all, so it's all based on on the grave findings. Uh, but that would be like one area
Yeah.
that's very different than what has been found elsewhere in Norway.
Yeah, exactly.
And then playing
Yeah.
with these things and interpreting them, and then is kind of what we do as writers, right? Like just in
Yep,
this conversation,
exactly.
I've already thought of two funny things I could do in a book. Maybe not my, the next one, but I was thinking of, the. Yeah, have you had this frustration that I've had of trying to like name certain things, like a sword, for example, right? Where you're just like, okay, how do I make this not sound stupid? And like there was one where like my character was fighting the Franks, and then he gets an Ulfbert, and he calls it the Frank Cleaver, and
Nice.
and then the first person who proofread the book, which was my mom, she's just like, that sounds like my dentist down the road, Frank Cleaver, and I'm like, yeah, I can't do that, can I? All right. So, and I just thought also of like, it could be funny because then you're, if you give it a name, you're giving it a gender, right? So it's like it's serpent spitter or something like that. And then the person go, wow, she's beautiful. Are you gendering my metal? How dare you? It's a boy, it's a man, it's a male. And then the other one is I was just thinking of a guy carving like an Odin statuette. Right? And they're like, "Oh, I'm carving Odin. Oh, okay. Why is he wearing a dress? It's not a dress. Yes, it is. It looks like a dress. It's not a dress. I'm just not good at wood carving." So stop criticizing my ability. It's my first time doing it. I want to have a good present for my children.
Oh, too bad Norseman isn't still being made.
I know, I love
Oh my
that show.
God, so
You need to
funny.
go try out and become a character of some kind.
So perfect.
They need to invite me to
Very
like
funny.
write some of this stuff too.
There you go.
Yeah, create the spin-off, dude. You need to do that.
And when you were talking about archaeology, so I don't remember the name of it, but there was like a little gold disc that was found, and on it says in runes, "He is Odin's man." I think it's something. I think it's "He
Like
is
a little
Odin's man."
bracteate. Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
And as soon as I saw that, I was like, and that was the genesis for like an idea of the book.
Hmm.
The trilogy I'm working on now was okay. So I have this king who's like he's so obsessed with Odin that he kind of like no other gods can be worshipped in his little area. Anyway, so that it was just like that just reading about that little gold disc that I was like, he is Odin's man. Like, how does that come to be? So anyway, yeah.
One of the
That's
biggest
interesting.
issues I've come across is using some of the Scandinavian words in the book, and readers who aren't familiar are just like, "What?" So, like the thing, there. So I
Mhm.
started calling it ting, so that people would realize that, but they still call it the ting in Norway. That's their legislature. It's,
In Iceland
or I'll call
too.
it the assembly.
Mhm.
Yeah, in Iceland it's the same. The Alþingi
Hmm.
is the name of the
Yeah,
modern parliament. Yeah.
exactly.
I used
Has
it
been for
in one, I
centuries.
think my first book, my critique group, because there's a big like rest area on I-10 in southern Arizona and New Mexico. Maybe it's in New Mexico. I don't remember, but it's along I-10. And it's called The Thing. And it's like this, they sell food and gas and they have all kinds of little like um Mexican and Native American like souvenirs and things like blankets and it is called The Thing. And so when I put it in my book, my readers who all live here were all like, "The thing?" So that was the thing they were thinking
Yeah,
about, and I was so I think I put ting too, or maybe all
yeah,
thing, I something like that.
I'm gonna go into that place and be like, "Can I see the law speaker, please?
yeah.
The law speaker?
Yeah.
Where's your law rock?"
Or the runes, did they have rune sticks too? Right? Isn't that a thing? The little rune sticks, they could write stuff down.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
They did a good job with that on Norseman.
Yeah.
They
That's what I
they
was
had all
thinking
these
of. Yeah.
jokes written down on pieces
Yeah.
of wood.
I also
That's
love
their
the law
bathroom
speaker,
book.
right? The law speaker who had, yeah, and then he's just like, I need to kill, I'm deathly allergic to bees. Are you? Yes. If I get stung, I will die immediately. I love the whole thing about dominoes too, right? Like the henchman comes up and he's like, it appears the first domino has fallen. What's a domino? It's a game with pieces. Do people go around knowing these things? Jarvarg part one at the trade market in Hedeby. It's, was it a threat? It's Varg. Of course it's a threat. Okay. That show, it's too good. It's too good. I'm so sad that they're not making another one.
I
Mm.
know, it was classic. It was so good.
Yeah.
The
So, oh, go ahead.
Oh, so the original Vikings one that you guys talked about in your latest podcast, though, that was good too, I thought. Well, I mean, I don't know. Actually, I would say the later ep series, or as I started to get towards the end, like year five, six, whatever, I was kind of like, eh. But the first couple, like basically up until Ragnar dies, I was all in. I thought, okay, they do a pretty good job here. I mean, obviously it's fiction and they're like, and it's dramatized and they're like, times doesn't matter, right? Because obviously Ragnar can't be alive and go to Lindisfarne and then also sack Paris, like, 60 years later and not look like he aged a day or anything like that. And Rollo and Ragnar are like, whatever, not brothers, but still,
Yeah.
I mean, to give a good feeling for like what it would be like. I think even Neil Price has commented on that too, as far as like, okay, this is what it feels like to have a farmstead and to sort of do the day to day and, to take your kid to the thing for the first time and all of that. I think I liked that show.
Mhm.
You
Yeah, and
didn't
they
like it,
based an
TJ.
awful lot of the incidents on things that were in record too.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
It was the first few. I think I draw the line after the second season. It was getting
Yeah.
iffy after that, but
Yeah. Yeah, I actually have my students watch just like the bit on the raid on Lindisfarne. I do think that had a pretty good feel for what
hmm
it must have
Mhm.
felt like. And that whole like the culture clash between the heathen and the Christian, and y'all probably remember like the moment that sort of stood out for me was when they find the monk, what is it, Ethelstan or whatever, that
Yeah.
they take back, but they find him what, like behind a piece of furniture or something, and he's clutching onto the book, and they're like lifting up the book and like trying to get the good stuff to fall out of the book, right? Like, what is this? Why is this, what you're saving out of all of this great stuff in this room? And he said it was the word of God, and without the word of God, there was nothing but darkness. And I just thought that was, I mean, I'm not a Christian or whatever, I'm not a religious person, and so it didn't hit me for that reason necessarily, but I just thought that's it. That highlights, sort of,
Mhm.
again, the culture clash of what's going on here. These two people are there for very different reasons and interacting in a way that's, yeah, anyway. But I thought they
Mhm.
did a good job.
I
I
thought they
like the
did a
point
great
when
job.
when they baptize Rollo and they put him in the river and they go to touch his forehead and
And you're
he's
like,
like going
yeah,
like, what
yeah,
is happening?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, they
So.
really. Oh, that's a good kind of topic for this group too, because they started off so well, and then it just degenerated into pure fantasy. And it's years ago I started boycotting it because I was like, this is just drivel, it's stupid. But now that kind of a little bit of extra time has passed, a little bit of life experience, and it's like it's also with my books, it's kind of that understanding that the history only gets you so far in terms of keeping an audience. Because after a while, it's like those things are great at the very beginning, but then it's like, okay, but you've got to up the ante every time. And it's like every time I write a new book in my Hastings saga, for example, he has to do something bigger. And as a writer, it drives me nuts that I have to figure out like how do I get him to do something bigger, but also keep it, because I try to keep everything very plausible within the historical context. But then, but I have to one up, like, oh, after Paris, what does he do? Well, now he's going to try Constantinople, right? And it's like, oh, wait a minute, I can't play too hard with that history, but then I can because there's gaps, and
Exactly.
only
hmm
15 years later you get the Varangian Guard. So it's, there's things to play with. So with I think that's something I'd like to hear from the two of you is how do you balance that as you go forward without losing that authenticity?
Well, for me,
Well,
I've gone farther and farther into fantasy. It's just, to me, I'm so interested in Viking Age magic and their beliefs. So, and in my first couple of books, I did make it seem possible. And now I've just gone farther and farther into it. And now I'm just obsessed with it. But Queen of Hell was a story where Osa actually goes to hell. And, I base it on the stories so that I make as realistic of a picture of hell based on the sagas and the myths as I can. But I also portray it as a mystical experience. She's gone into a trance and she goes to hell that way. So anyway, that's what I've done. How about you,
Hmm.
Kim?
I pretty much only write trilogies, so I don't get my characters, and I don't have to go that far. So so I don't have to keep like, making everything bigger and bigger. I have like an idea for a story, and it's like, first act, second act, third act, and then it's wrapped up, so I don't really have to keep upping it. But this new one I'm working on has a little more magic. even though it's basically what they believe, like, I have a woman who can like she takes some stuff and she goes into a trance and she has visions, right? And then I have another one who does I don't want to call it shape shifting, but she can like, like they have characters who like throw their minds into an animal's mind. So I have that going on. Like it's stuff they actually believed in
Yeah.
and that are in the sagas or all over the sagas. And so I'm like, well, it's kind of historical because they truly
It's
believe that
documented. Yeah.
they believe that. So, but it's not something that we're like thinking, well, that's historical. So it's like I'm kind of like there's that edge, but I've never written more than a trilogy and I don't really ever plan to because I have a terrible attention span and I get tired of things really quickly. Like, okay, I'm done with these characters and I'm ready to move on. So I really can't see myself writing past 3 books anyway.
Be like Octavia. Was she on like her 12th book and 12th
Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah,
installment in
yeah.
the series or
Yeah.
something?
Oh, her
Right.
latest one.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you brought her up because this is interesting. Have either of you picked up on this interesting trend that I've noticed that, and it's really there's a community of authors all circling around the Norse, and there's quite a few, but we all sort of circle around the same developments. Kind of like
Mm.
Joanna, you mentioned, kind of moving into the magical realm, right? And I've seen that with like 3 other authors, and my character is having this spiritual transformation, whereas he's seeing more mystical visions and that sort of thing, right? And it's like, have you noticed that we kind of all kind of, we're not, I don't, and what's interesting is all these books kind of come out at the same time. So there's no way I could have read yours, no way you could have read mine, no way I could have read Octavia's, no way she could have read mine, right? And so I send my character to Byzantium, to Constantinople, and I noticed like 12 other authors released books within 3 weeks of my releasing mine of
I have
characters
a
going to
book.
Constantinople. And I'm like, so are we, is this like, is this the algorithms
Hive
or
mind.
Ooh.
Oh, we're tapping into something. I have a
yeah.
character who went to Constantinople. Only I decided to subvert things, and he did not have a good experience there. He kind of crashed and burned and hightailed it back to Denmark. But yeah, I don't know. There must be something in the zeitgeist or something
Yeah,
about.
because we all
Well,
kind of, move in that same direction almost. Yeah.
It might just be the evolution of Vikingology. The way
Mm.
they developed, and it is so interesting because, we know that they did go to Constantinople, but we just don't know a lot of details about it. So interesting. It's interesting when you
Yeah.
can just like really dig for those details and try to get it to you know come to life in your mind, because I did do some one of my characters goes down the Volga, and he doesn't go all the way to Constantinople, but he goes through the Rus. And I read so many books trying to get this place to come alive in my mind. It was really an experience to do that.
It's hard
And it,
because I did that too. One of my characters went down the one who went to Constantinople, he went down the Dnieper and but everything has changed so much.
oh,
Even Constantinople or Hagia Sophia, I wanted to get a idea of what he would have seen, but it has changed so much since like, the 9th century or whatever. And so I watched all these videos and read about it, and I finally just landed on he's this young kid. He's young-ish. He was like 17, I think, in that book. And he, anyway, but he was just awed by it. Like and he was really taken by how much gold there was. So he's a Viking, so he liked the gold. But yeah, I couldn't really describe it exactly because I'm like, it's changed a lot in the last, 1200 years. So I was just trying to like, let's just go with awe. Like, how did they do this? So.
and that's a great approach because that's there your reader is able to experience it through your character without going into all this info dump and so much detail.
Mhm.
Mhm.
so that brings to mind actually something I think is interesting for me, and CJ's talked about it too with his books before in various podcast episodes we've had that so as a historian, I'm always trying to like at the most that I can to try to understand their world the way they did, right? And to
Mm.
inhabit that space. And yet for writing somebody who's going to read it now, you have to write it in an accessible way that they can sort of relate to. So how about that kind of like the tension between those two? I mean, obviously, maybe it gets a little bit to the sort of historical accuracy versus, complete fiction on the other end of it. But still, I mean, if you're trying to transport these people into a place and time, like you said, Johanna, then it's like, well, you want it to try to feel a little authentic, whatever that means, right? But then at what level do you be like, okay, I have to stop because people are just not going to understand this or it isn't going to connect or something like that.
Well, slavery is one of those things that's, really difficult to address. And I kind of skirt that issue. I do have a character who is enslaved in an earlier book. Um, so I do address it a little bit, but basically that's a tough one. That's really tough for a modern sensibility. And I try to avoid it.
Yeah, that is a hard one. I have my main character in my Norse Family series when she's young, like how old was she? 6, 7-ish. She and the family and people were like traveling, and she got snatched by some outlaws, and they were going to sell her. And so that formative thing that happened to her frightened her so much. So like she doesn't really want slaves. Like she can actually put herself in the position of a young female slave. And so I kind of gave her that moment to make her like it's still there. It's like there because her family, I mean, she wasn't like an ordinary person. Her father was a jarl, so she was pretty well off, and they had slaves, but she didn't mistreat them. So I gave her that formative moment to explain why she felt differently about it than maybe other people.
Yeah, interesting. That's a yeah, slavery is a big one, isn't it?
Mm.
Because I think it's so hard for we think about it in such a particular way in the modern world, largely based on events of not very long, right? The last 400 years-ish or something. Um, but to try to get in the headspace of people who it's just like so utterly normal and a possibility for like everybody. And maybe in some cases it's not even, it's not what we would think, right? It's just sort of an unfree legal status, but maybe otherwise it's like, all right. And actually, so the example I'm thinking of is a friend of mine talked about slavery in the ancient Roman past, and the idea that we know that Romans did as far as prizing educated people because of certain levels of skills, right? That they could do professional skills that we would call now like maybe being accountant or something like that. I don't know, but working in the household of a like say a senator or something, somebody that's pretty well off, pretty high up status. And then you would be like, oh, but you're still a slave. And then I always sort of thinking to myself, like, if you asked that person and you framed it in that way, would they have a concept really of what you're talking about? Or would they be like, do you know what my life would be like if I didn't live and work in this household? It would be utter shit. Like, I would probably be dead within a week. So, like, this ain't so bad. Do you know what I mean? I mean, obviously not like trying to like make an argument for slavery, but I'm sort of making an argument for like how it's so difficult for us to get our head in that space because we don't live in that world. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, for me, that was the hardest one. And, the other thing is, you could indenture yourself if
Yeah.
you fell onto hard times. And there was actually a ritual, a ceremony for a master giving a slave their freedom. That was one of the when I researched the beer parties the ale parties that they had to have by law.
Yeah.
That was one of the reasons for having them was if you were a slave had earned their freedom, this is where you gave them their freedom. This is where the master awarded them, and they actually had a ceremony where the master took off his one shoe and the slave put his foot in one shoe in that shoe, and but it was in front of witnesses. It was a formal legal event. Yeah, I mean, what do you make of that? Especially when then you have, slaves that are captured and they're very different. I mean, their status is different from your neighbor who indentured himself because he was needed the money, because he
Yeah.
was going to lose his farm. I mean, who knows what? It's hard to imagine.
Totally. And I know definitely the Gragas, but that's based on older Norwegian law as well, that there was, the inheritance trade. I mean, you could basically take your inheritance and go and give it to somebody else and just say, here, I'm going to trade this so that basically you become now the person who's the beneficiary of whatever I would have inherited, but you're going to be responsible for me now. You're going to take care of me because otherwise maybe, for whatever reason, I don't have anybody else in my life to do that. And so I think that's another thing that for us in kind of the comfort of the Western world, we don't understand subsistence lifestyle and the fact that it's like it's so hard to just survive without community and support and everything. And it's just, yeah, so that you would actually, give up your own liberty, personal liberty, because it's, more important to like eat, you know?
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And that's why
exactly.
being an outlaw was such a big deal. Like
Yeah,
if you were
exactly.
Yes.
outlawed and people could just
Yep.
kill you because you were an outlaw, like
Yep.
that's because you need that community.
Yep.
And I know people
Exactly.
have talked about language, a language as a barrier to historical fiction. Like, do you write in a more modern cadence or do you try to make it sound like I know like some writers, some big writers in like the 80s and stuff used to like have everybody speak super formally and everything. And I really, it's a barrier to your, with your readers, between you and your readers. So I pretty much just like I know some historical fiction people like, oh, I don't ever use contractions when my characters are talking. And I'm like, I am not going to go there. I'm just going to have them speak like we speak. Only, I'm really aware of like not throwing in anachronisms and things like that. I'm not going to have somebody say okay or anything like
Yeah.
that. So, but
So
yeah,
didn't you have
language
an
can be.
editor that told you that your character sounded like he just came out of rehab or something like that?
Oh no, it was yeah, it was so I write in a really contemporary manner because it's with the people who are reading the books are alive today,
Yeah.
and that Terry and I have talked about this before. I have a very good example of why you shouldn't go full Viking. This the movie The Norseman, where they went full Viking, and it was so alien to people that it flopped. I mean, because I can't identify with the character, and even people who are very learned. In fact, I think it was Peter at medievalist.net. He and we went back and forth describing this movie, and it was actually really fun. And it was basically saying, it's basically a slasher film from the point of view of the killer, right? And it's like, but he's, in the Viking Age, he's the hero, right?
Yeah.
So, so you lose modern audiences, and so I do write in a very contemporary manner. Also, because as a school teacher, so I write mainstream adult fiction, but I do write in a way that I feel like young people would be able to access as well. I don't want to make it inaccessible to them. My first books that I wrote were young adult, but then I moved out of that just because it was too narrow of a scope. But I did have somebody mention in one of the books that, yeah, my character sounded like he was coming out of rehab in Palo Alto. And I was like, good, I'm glad because that's it,
That's
The kind
because
of
right.
guy he was.
it's his character arc. He's
Yeah.
struggling, man, and he's getting
Hmm.
advice. And by the way, when you come out of rehab in Palo Alto, what do they indoctrinate into? Probably some form of AA religious indoctrination, right? Like where they're just like, you need to have your higher power and this sort of thing. That's what a priest does, right? So it's like, yes, thank you for properly characterizing my book. Thank you. Yes, because in the Viking Age, if you're struggling and you talk to a priest and he gets into your head, you're going to come out talking like a guy out of rehab in Palo Alto.
I think that Palo Alto thing is perfect now after we talked to Eleanor last time and figured out that the Vikings were the tech bros of the
Oh, that's
Vikings.
right. We did say that. Yeah. What was the other one? I've had a couple of really good gems. But one of them was talking about my dialogue being too contemporary, and I just thought, but these people aren't speaking English. English didn't
Exactly.
exist.
That's right.
So, I mean,
And
would
even
it
if
be
it
any?
did, they
Yeah.
even if they were speaking English, we wouldn't have understood their English either because
Right.
Right.
the English of that time period was so foreign too.
It wasn't English yet. It was still a different thing. It was
It was
Yeah,
yeah,
it
Anglo-Saxon
was.
and yeah.
Hmm.
closer to German, right? I mean, it took a
Mm.
little bit
Yeah,
of a French infusion to make it the English we know and love
right.
today.
Oh,
Uh,
plug the French.
and then a great vowel shift that made things very complicated because they're like, you know what? It's too complicated. Let's ignore half of all the consonants. Ah, yes, all right.
Yeah,
It starts with a K and ends with a T. Don't say it. But
like
yeah,
Irish.
yeah.
Well, I give my Vikings very, I don't know. I mean, I don't. I think they. I mean, I know they're human, and I wanted to give them human emotions that we all experience, love and loss, and all that kind of stuff. But sometimes I feel like I don't. We don't know how they really felt, right? We don't know what they were feeling
Mm-mm.
deep down. I had one of my characters, he's a Viking warrior and he's like so devoted to like his children. Like he loves his children. And I took that from Eagle. I was like, okay, when Eagle's sons were dead, he like took to his bed for like 3 days or something, and his daughter had to go and coax him out, like, you want to keep living. And I was like, okay, here's somebody, he's like just like the most bloodthirsty Viking. When did he kill his first person? When he was like 7 years old or something?
Yes.
Yeah.
And yet he loves his kids, right? He's so distraught when they die that he takes to his bed. So I was like, okay. And I used to practice a martial art, and I was at a seminar with a teacher, and he was German, and he's this big, like, I don't know, he's a stereotypical looking German guy. He was big and he was, loud and like just and he was so sweet with both his sons who were grown and his little grandson. He would like kiss his sons, and when his little grandson was running around the dojo, he'd snatch him up and hold him and like demonstrate techniques while he was holding his little grandson and stuff. And I
Oh,
was like, okay. My big tough Vikings can also be gentle
Human.
and caring with their
Mhm.
Humans.
kids. Right,
yeah.
exactly. We hold lots of stuff within us. We can have violent feelings and
Yeah.
loving and all of it. So I just give them all of that.
Well, not just human, just alive, right? I mean, there's that Disney movie, The Chimpanzees, and they have the little baby Oscar, and his mom's killed in a fight, and then he's orphaned, which he should have died. But then the alpha male of the group like adopted him, and it's like one of those drama. I mean, it's if you haven't seen it, you should check it out because it's one of
What's it
those
called?
dramas. It's called Chimpanzee, and it's
Hmm.
it's from Disney, and it's in the whole. I don't know how they filmed this or how they were able to, but basically this little monkey who has no relation to this giant male that's a killer, right? I mean, he's the big bad guy, and he just starts mimicking him, cracking open like nuts and stuff, and he just gets a little closer and a little closer, and you see this giant, and I mean, I know a lot of people don't like to admit it, but we're animals at the end of the day, and we're actually chimpanzees are very closely related to us. And so it's kind of that same. I don't know why I went to chimpanzees, but it's just
Okay,
I just
I'll take it in another weird way, but it's connected to this. I'll take it to praying mantis.
oh,
Like
Okay.
I found it. We have praying mantis on our farm, and I finally got to see one, actually hold one. They're really big, whatever. And so I sent a picture to a friend of mine who's like this amazing and really smart guy. Anyway, and he is very, very much a scholar of like Darwinian biology, and he said something about the I think the females like eat the males, so they kill them like after they have sex or whatever. And
they
and
cut
I,
off their
I just
heads first.
yeah, and I joked
Yeah.
something or no, he said something about oh, the ingratitude, of that, right? And I said, yeah, when I wonder what Darwin would have said about applying a human emotion like gratitude to an insect. And he wrote back like this list of citations from Darwin where Darwin was explaining all of the basically, sort of like human emotions that various animals, including insects, appear to exhibit. So I don't think we're off. We're all just these
Mhm.
biological beings on this planet, and we have, similarities.
And I've been noticing I follow a lot of like pages about and I get lots of animals like dog and cat stuff in my Instagram feed because I just need things that make me feel good in my Instagram feed. And I've just been noticing just recently about how so many of these dogs are like really understanding English, or this is in the US, and some of them are really, really like exhibiting really human behavior. Like there was one with a woman who called to her dog and said, smile, and the dog actually turned to her and bared its teeth in a way that was literally looked like she was smiling. And I was like, are dogs like becoming even? I mean, I know, are they becoming more human-like or attuned to humans? Because I think I read something once about how they have whites in their eyes. Dogs evolved to have whites in their eyes so they can reflect humans more. So when they look around, we can identify with them more rather than
Wow.
I guess wolves don't have whites in their eyes. So anyway, but just thinking about animals and being human, I think dogs are becoming more and more human.
Yeah, that's the evolutionary process, right?
Hmm.
That,
Yep, they
And I
change
think
out.
some animals become very, very socialized, towards their humans. Um, my cats were they were very human-like. I mean, and one time I was trying to give one of the cats his medicine, and he was hiding, and the other cat led me to him.
oh,
So, I mean,
that's
and he turned
cold.
around and went, meow.
Oh,
Did he
it's
get
like,
beat up later? Snitches get stitches.
Yeah.
Wow.
I'm sure that's right. But it was quite surprising to me. I'm like, wow, that seems really human.
Yeah. I have some animals in my books. It was kind of
they
fun to
had
look up.
animals. Those
Sure. Yeah.
skeletons show
Yep,
up in lots
yep,
of graves.
Yeah.
yep.
Dogs and
I have
cats
a
and
dead horse in my book who, when Osa goes to hell, a horse that died in battle is there waiting for her.
that's cool.
Yeah.
So
Huh.
Osa's made up, right? All of a sudden, I'm like remembering we had Ellen
Mm.
Marie and Ness on the podcast. Gosh, when CJ, that's probably been like a year and a half or 2 years ago already. But she's
Mhm.
one of the curators at the museum in Oslo, and she's worked there for a long, long time. And so then she talked to us about like what they're doing now with the museum and all the new stuff and what everything, but the history of the Oseberg ship. And she said that because Norway becomes an independent nation in 1905, and she said that because it was found, not very long, right around that time, that it was just part of kind of one of those nationalist origin stories. Because obviously we don't know who that woman was, right? But then the Norwegians at that time said, "Hey, it's a queen," and then they're like, "Yeah, that's it. Let's go with that." So that's what your character is based on, or
Uh, she's actually based on supposedly a real person who's in the Heimskringla, and also in I want to say it's in another source as well, and I can't remember the other source, but she's mentioned she's the mother of Halfdan the Black, and there is a legend about her that she was the daughter of the king of Agder, and Gudrid, who is the king of Vestfold, wanted to marry her, and her father said no. So Gudrid attacked Agder and killed everybody and kidnapped her. And she went back with him. She got pregnant right away. And when her son was a year old, she had Gudrid killed. And she took her son and went back to Agder and ruled for the next 18 to 20 years until her son was of age. And that is supposedly a true, she's called semi-legendary, which is the same with Halfdan the Black and Gudrid and Ragnar and everybody else. But there is that story about her. Uh, and so that's what my character is based on. Now, for many, many years, they believed that she was the queen in the Oseberg ship, in the burial. But since then, once they did the dendrochronological dating of the Oseberg ship, and then if you take all the facts, or the quote unquote facts, like the year that Harold Fairhair was born, and that when he died, his father was 40 and Harold Fairhair was 10 years old. Well, we don't actually know what year Harold Fairhair was born. But if you take all those things and do the math, then it would be hard for Osa to be even the younger woman. But then The younger woman is somewhat of a date range as well. There's a woman who's supposed to be 50 and another woman who's around 80, between in her 70s or 80s.
Yeah.
So when they did all the math and everything, they said, well, it couldn't have been Queen Osa in this grave because she would be too old to have had been the mother of Halfdan the Black. If if the, the burial chamber wood was dated to 834, and that's definitive.
Hmm.
Well, so that's assuming that those trees were chopped down at the time that this person was buried. So there's all this complicated stuff. It could be Osa, it might not be Osa. It's somebody like her. So, and who lived in the same time period. So all the details in the Oseberg burial ship can definitely be applied to Queen Osa. Whether that's actually her grave or not is completely not known.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah,
there's
because I
no
think
way to identify who the people were who were buried.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, because I know for the longest time too, for whatever reason, the main hypothesis is like, oh, the younger one clearly was a slave that got,
Yeah,
sacrificed, and it's sort of like,
because
well, how you don't know that, right? I mean,
well,
yeah,
very few bones of that younger woman is there. Most of the bones are gone.
yeah,
And it showed that she had broken her collarbone, so that's why they thought she was sacrificed. But the collarbone had started to heal before she died.
yeah,
And of course, originally they thought she was maybe in her 20s and the older woman was in her 50s. So now they've got very different, they've done more analysis and they've got different theories about these people. But one was younger, one was older. They don't know what clothes went to who because they found fragments of cloth in the burial. But the skeletons were dragged into the grave was robbed in about 100 years after it was put into after the burial took place. And the grave was robbed, and the thieves dragged the skeletons of these women into their passage. So these bones were found scattered. They weren't even found in the grave anymore. They were found scattered throughout the robbers' tunnel. And things were all mixed up and there was, fragments of cloth. There was no jewelry left in this grave. So, that
yeah,
was taken. Who knows what was taken out of there, but there were some things that were found intact as well. And they have the Osberg tapestries.
yeah,
So there's a lot of inconclusive things about the Osberg grave.
yeah, yeah. Because it seems like didn't CJ? I can't remember. Like, did Ellen tell us that? Because maybe they could do like, some genetic testing because we don't even know if they were biologically related to those two
Right,
women.
exactly. There's
Um,
not enough DNA in I think it was the older woman. They couldn't get enough
that was
DNA.
it. Yeah, that was
Yeah,
where I was misremembering or not remembering if they wanted to do the testing, but there was a reason that they weren't doing it.
they
And that,
weren't able to get enough
that's too
DNA.
bad, man.
I
That could solve a
know,
lot of
I know.
mysteries.
I'm
Man,
dying to know the truth, but we probably never will.
right,
Well,
exactly.
that was you and I going back and forth a little while ago, Joanna, where it is because I read the first book in your series, and I was like, oh, hey, I know these characters because I did a bunch of research for it. Because my first series that I wrote, which I don't recommend anyone read because I wrote them when I was 19, and they're not. I don't want you to read them. But it's the basically the my character ends up being the one who's hired by Oza to kill Gudrod, and then he gets snuck out of of the area, so that he doesn't get killed himself. And then she has plausible deniability and that sort of thing. So I kind of researched that whole thing. But that's actually a good, an interesting segue too. So one of the criticisms of my book that I got, as compared to say Bernard Cornwell, is my character is real, Hastings. He's a real guy. And I've had several people say maybe that's to his detriment. Have you found that to be true for having, because you're working with somebody who's semi-legendary, I suppose, instead of
Hmm.
actually verifiably real? And then same for you, Kim. Are you working with characters that you're completely inventing, or are these people that are verifiably real as well?
Well, I can answer quick. Mine are all fictional.
Hmm.
I started my very first book. I had wanted to write about, um, now I can't even remember his name. He was a Swedish king whose nephew Styrbjorn was trying to take over, and he had like made a deal with Odin.
Olaf?
No, I don't think it
Oh,
was some
anyway,
a
I don't
herald.
know.
Anyway, And then I was doing something with an Icelandic story, and I just decided I don't feel like doing this. And I just made a switch and just I'm just going to be all fictional. So,
I think that's great. There's and in my series, which is now I'm working on book 8, there is a mixture of people who were real people who are in the chronicles or whatnot, and fictional characters. And but all of my characters are fictionalized, and there's so little information about these people that you can fictionalize as much as you want. Um, and I still go back to the idea of putting the reader in the transporting them to another time and place and letting those characters be relatable. As Kim was saying earlier, you really want to focus on those feelings, those emotions that that everybody has, that are universal to people.
Mhm. Yeah, and
And
because
that
of all
lets the
these, oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say that lets the reader enter this world. That's their door.
Mm. Yeah, and because of all the mysteries, it makes the Viking Age a very forgiving sandbox to play
Mm.
in. Because I also wrote a book about the fur trade, a fur trapper, and that's not quite as forgiving because we know so much more about that. Where it was like, and I actually had a discrepancy where I moved a date around and the editor didn't catch it, and then I had a reader come back and be like, Central Park wasn't built until the 18. I was like, whatever.
I don't know if I
Oops.
could go to that kind of historical fiction where you have to be that accurate, because I love to research, but I also love to let my imagination just go crazy.
hmm hmm
I'm also writing with a different name. I write some books that take place in the 1980s. And, there's a lot known, but I also grew up then. So I feel like I've got a good entry into it. And I still do my research and stuff. Like one of my characters was a swimmer, and I had to go back and I was like, did they, I was just like certain things like, did they even have when did they stop using a starter pistol and start using the beeper, whatever, just things like that. But it's a lot easier for me. But then my mom, who grew up in Chicago, she was talking about some stuff with her family, and I was like, oh, the 19 teens in Chicago, that would be a cool time to write about, right? And then I got kind of excited for about 2 days, and then I just had to
You
stop
remembered
myself.
how much research you had to do for the Viking Age,
Woo,
right?
right? And I was like, and so much would
Wow.
be known about the 19 teens, early 1920s in Chicago. There would just be so much information I'd have to go. It would take me 10 years just to do the research. And I had to stop myself from doing that.
So bonus points to the Vikings, right? Yeah.
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 It's wide open.
Although
Yeah.
that brings to mind actually a good question for writers in this current day and age, and it's like, how much of could you just use AI to help you with that? Mm.
I don't
Ew.
use AI at
Yeah, AI
all.
is so unreliable. It comes up with
Boo.
such ridiculous crap. Nope.
No,
I
no
mean,
Besides, it takes
AI
a
it's the
here.
ton of.
elephant in the room, right? I mean, whether you
Yeah.
love it or hate it or somewhere in between. I mean, and as a faculty who has to read student papers and people, I mean, it's everywhere, right? I mean, and it's so inescapable. Actually, you know what? I mean, like even as sort of an odd way it's occurring to me, like 2 or 3 days ago, they were talking about around here, like our main sort of electrical utility coming out and saying about all these these rate hikes that are coming and everything, and it's because of these giant server farms that are because of the AI and the building up of AI, and it's just like, really, we have to pay more on our electric bill because of
Yeah.
this stupid technology that nobody asked for, but the tech
Yeah.
pros are just shoving down our throats. It's like, what the hell, you know?
Exactly. They
And
wanted
it's
to
just
build a big data center here, and we were like, this is the desert. That thing requires tons of water. Like, what are you doing? But I guess the reason was because our weather is so stable. Like, there's no hurricanes or tornadoes or earthquakes or anything here. So they were thinking, we were like, yeah, but we don't have any water. Like, we've had like
Tow an
three
iceberg in
rains.
and then ship it over land.
Seriously. Yeah.
so how much though do you think it's creeping into the writing trade?
in my opinion, not that much because most of the writers I know really despise it.
Mm.
Um, and also because so much of our work has been stolen. I mean, I'm part of the class action lawsuit for my books were in the LibGen, uh, and there's several class action lawsuits where my books they haven't determined which books, but they may have been used, uh, for AI training. And so, they stole my work. That's plagiarism, and a lot of AI is plagiaristic because of they scrape the internet,
Yeah.
and so they're stealing our work, and they're not giving us credit for it. So I don't know. I don't like it. I
Yeah.
can see the fatal attraction, and when I've used it, I've found that it does work pretty well for a blurb. If you want a blurb, AI can do a good job where writing a blurb for your own work is, as you probably know, the hardest thing, one of the hardest things an author can do, a blurb or a synopsis. And so it's good for that because it comes up with ideas that, like no human would think of and looks at things from a different angle than you might. So that's about as far as I can see it being useful. I honestly think most writers just despise it and wouldn't touch it. So,
Yeah.
Well, I feel like sometimes when writers will talk about, well, I use it for brainstorming or I use it for this. And I was like, For me, that's the fun part. I
yeah.
like the struggle. I like doing the research. I like the struggle of coming up with like my story idea, or even when I get stuck and it's like, what should my characters do now? I'm kind of stuck. I don't want to rely on this AI to do that for me because I like to do that. And and I'm also thinking, I read an article recently where they're actually seeing in college students that it's like impairing, like it's smoothing their brains out so that critical thinking is not there. So that's we need that struggle when we're thinking and when we're trying to decide on something, when we're doing things. Our brains need that struggle to grow and develop. And if we just take that all away, I don't see what the point is.
Yeah.
If I'm going to let AI do all this stuff for me, like why am I even a writer? Like I just don't know.
Exactly.
Yeah, I wrote
But
a
Yeah.
that's
post on my
me.
personal Substack about this, if I don't know, a couple months ago or something. And it was right about the time when Adobe started to add that, like every time you opened a PDF to read it in Adobe, it would be like, this looks like a long article. Would you like me to like, recap this for you or however it says it? And I'm just like, no. He's like, I totally agree with you, Kim. It's like, no, I like to do that myself. Thank you very much. And I hate like I have to click like go away, just go away. Just
Yeah, that we have to
I
opt
don't want to
out.
opt out.
I mean, I
I want
wanted
to
to do
opt
my
in.
dishes and my laundry and like I want like
Yeah.
robots to do that stuff. I don't want it to
Yeah.
I just
Not the critical thinking
go
part.
do my grocery shopping for me or whatever. I don't want it to write my books.
Yeah. Yeah,
Well, and
exactly.
I think that, there are people in the world who think that if they start producing AI books, they're going to make lots of money.
Yeah.
And I'm here to tell you that ain't going to happen. I don't think that AI is going to be able to write bestsellers. It's because it's missing that human element, no matter how hard they scrape. That's my opinion.
It's
Yeah, I think
already a
Peter talked
saturated
about,
market. Yeah.
It
yeah.
is. It is.
That's
Yeah.
true.
Didn't Peter
Yeah.
Gibbon talk to us about that a little bit? Like where it's like, oh, these people who can then like seemingly churn out, full novels like once a month or something like that because
There are people doing that. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I have a suspicion some of the bigger outfits are doing that. Um, because you get like your Clive Cussler. He hasn't written a book since the 70s, right? He's got a team of writers that the publisher uses and then they punch out. And their speed was like, he could put out a book a month because he's got this team of people writing books for him. Or so I have heard. I don't know for sure, so don't sue me, publishers. But that's it. We know that the ghostwriting industry was alive and well before AI, and I think that it's going to start sneaking in there, right? Why have a ghostwriter when you can just have AI be your ghostwriter, and it's a lot cheaper for the publishers. And I think that's where we'll start to see it first. Although I will say, I published because I hired a human translator to translate my books into French because French is a very literary language, especially the written, and there's a right way to do it, and AI just doesn't get it. And so I have, plus I was just like, this gal translated my first one in 2019 before AI ever existed. And I was like, you get to translate, I want you to translate my two other ones for consistency. But when my publisher put my books up in the French Amazon, for example, because they put it in the National Library and then it gets put on Amazon. And I noticed that the category that I was in, we had some good sales at the beginning, so I jumped up in the category pretty quickly, and all the other books were all AI written in the entire category, and it was the same person, and they had like 80 books in there, right? And of
Mm,
course, I outpaced them, which was nice.
good
But
for you.
then all their covers were AI, and you start reading, you're like,
Ugh.
and I just don't know because like even with the outlining thing, right? Like I've had AI, I've tested it out to outline some stuff, and it just doesn't. It,
Doesn't get it.
yeah, and like it's very different than like when I put together an outline, and I send it over to my editor, and then we go back and forth and make sure that everything, like there's a, and then it's just that's, and then what comes out is, I guess you could call it art, right? Whereas what AI is putting out, no way.
Well, so the
So
problem
Yeah.
I think too is like, well, like look at like sort of the generational shift then too, because we're all sitting here of, well, I'll make a guess that we're all not 22. Like, well, at least I know I'm not as of yesterday. I just turned 23. No, that we lived in a time before this, and now it's being foisted on us, and we're having to figure out how to deal with it or not, whatever. And then I mean, I talked to other faculty who are like, oh, putting things in their syllabus, like where, that's plagiarism or that's cheating or what, it's like, or I'm trying to tweak my assignments so that they can't use Chat GPT or whatever it is that they're going to use. I'm like, this is a game of whack-a-mole that you're not going to win, and so there's like this whole sense of like, okay, we're at that point where we're like, yeah, we don't really care for it that much or only in a limited sense or something like that. But when you've got 20-year-olds now who are being schooled in, how to use that and that future jobs will maybe in some way rely on it or you know what I mean? So like let's fast forward say 25 years from now and see what does that landscape look like with people who have fully embraced it because they didn't really know anything else.
Well, and
Well,
what
my
about
son
the
is a
advent of
computer.
calculators, for example, especially
Yeah.
scientific calculators? And
Yeah.
now they're the norm, It
Yep.
has that, it probably has hurt our thinking.
Yeah.
Hmm. Well, even books and writing language down, we don't memorize things nearly as well as we would if we were an
That's
oral
the post.
society.
That's the post I literally just made on my Substack. I wrote like yesterday or the day before about what writing has done to us because it's a blessing and a curse. But it's a very old idea that I even quoted a piece from one of Plato's dialogues where one of the characters was griping about what have you done with, asking people to start writing things down? You've basically given them a way to start forgetting things because you don't have to commit anything to memory anymore. And this comes into play too, obviously, like with studying something like the Viking Age, like we all do, that like, oh, well, before Christianity, they're pretty much an oral culture, or, like how much can you really rely on that kind of stuff? It's like, well, you know what? In the Middle Ages, actually quite a bit, because people didn't have 8-second soundbite memories like we do now. They actually remembered things. But the idea of beginning to sort of document yourself by writing it down, but also erasing yourself from existence at the same time, because now you have no sort of memory of anything, I think is and it's just interesting. And I think it's something that people don't think about a lot.
That's really true.
hmm.
Well,
Well, even
I
pictures.
probably won't see it.
Well, even pictures. Like sometimes I wonder, like how many of my memories are set because I remember them from pictures rather than actually remembering them. Like,
That's a
Yeah,
good point.
yeah. There's been a lot of brain science actually done about that, about how
mm,
utterly malleable people's memories are. And you can, implant memories into people that they don't even have, things that never even happened. So actually,
What
CJ, that makes me think too of like what you were talking about earlier, with brain science of, you're having to have the character do a bigger thing or a better whatever
Mm.
time and time again. That to me like plugs into the brain science of addiction because you're like you're feeding your readers this drug and you're like having them chase the high by having Hastings do something bigger and better every single time.
Oh,
I
that's
think you need a
the
book where he's just boring the whole time, and you like to train people to be like set. It's okay if he's just
yeah.
boring.
I mean, I gotta eat, man. Like, it's
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
and people do really get to like your characters too.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Yeah. Well, it's actually funny you say that, Terry, because Dr. Anna Lemke, who wrote the book Dopamine Nation, and talks about all the and how addicted we are to all sorts of things. Her gateway drug was shitty romance novels.
Yeah, that's right. That's
So
right.
it's just it's so yeah. I mean, I bet you there's people out there who are like, I need another one of those Viking tasting novels. You know, it's
You're like the pusher on the corner.
yeah.
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 Here you go, man. He doesn't. I read them all. I need another one. Okay, well, I'll have Joanna Wittenberg's novel. Okay, I'll move over to Kim Barton now, and then maybe all together we can keep this guy alive.
He wants to be the El Chapo of the writing world.
Well, on that note,
Yeah.
thank you so much for coming on the show. I think we went down all the right rabbit holes.
It
That
It
was
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 fun.
lots
fun.
of
Thanks
fun.
for having us.
Yeah.
Yeah.